The message of God's grace isn't just foolishness, like the message of the cross. The message of God's grace is offensive to those of us who consider ourselves righteous in any sphere. Jesus spends much of chapter 14 of Luke, the chapter before where we are today, talking about table fellowship. Chapter 15, where we start today, has Jesus showing full acceptance and love of tax collectors and sinners as he eats with them. The righteous, the Pharisees and the scribes, who are in an oppressed minority and need to keep themselves alive and keep their people holy to God, have objections to Jesus' behavior. After telling the righteous people, those whom God has never lost, stories about God rejoicing over a found coin and rejoicing in heaven over a found sheep, Jesus tells them this story we have today. This is a story about God's impossible love and God's offensive grace. A man loves his two sons. One takes his inheritance before his father's death. That son goes and spends his inheritance and has to feed pigs to try and make some money. Feeding pigs makes him ritually unclean, and he thinks about how he'd like to eat some of their animal feed. He's made choices, and he's doing what it takes to survive. Frederick Brennan was born in 1994. That's hard for me to believe because my youngest brother was born in 1992, and no one was born after that. Elle Reeve tells Brennan's story in her book, Black Pill: How I Witnessed the Darkest Corners of the Internet Come to Life, Poison Society, and Capture American Politics. Fred Brennan was born with brittle bone disease. As he matured and grew, it became clear that he's on the autism spectrum. The United States is not friendly to people whose bodies and brains work differently than the majority. We don't provide infrastructure for those people to have the fullest lives possible, whether that's physical infrastructure to move around and exist outside of their homes, to paid human support for people who need extra help at home. So Brennan turned to the internet. He made friends, or at least people he could interact with who didn't cause his social anxiety to explode. He found communities where he felt accepted. As he found places that eased his sense of isolation, he picked up some gnarly sexism and misogyny. He grew concerned with what he saw as censorship in some of those communities where he had been thriving. So at the age of 19, he founded 8chan, which later became 8kun. This is where Q-drops existed, and QAnon faithful received their messages from Q. And it's where they found one another. Brennan's thoughts as he owned 8chan was, as long as it's legal in the US, it can stay on these image and message boards. With the hope and naivete of a 19-year-old, his guiding principle was that in an uncensored, unmoderated marketplace of ideas, open debate would raise the best ideas to the top. What he found in time is that most people don't want to see anti-Semitism, racism, or unbridled misogyny and sexism, so they leave. That leaves the trolls, who are just trying to be more extreme than the last guy. But then they start to believe it. The jokes aren't jokes anymore. The posts keep getting more and more extreme. These young men were doing what they thought they needed to do to survive. Like the son who goes off and spends his inheritance only to wind up feeding pigs and wanting to eat their slop because he's so hungry. That their version of reality is not the one we live in doesn't excuse them. How much did you not know you didn't know at 16 or 19 or 23? What started on the Chans moved to the app Telegram and culminated in the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. I'm sure you all remember that, and we now know that it was a precursor to the failed insurrection on January 6th. The story that Jesus tells the righteous is about a father who loves his two sons. When the younger returns, the father rejoices at this return. The son apologizes. He admits he was wrong and asks to just be kept alive, to be treated like a hired hand, having forsaken his title as part of the family. Jesus tells us that the Father doesn't make him eat bread and water in the barn, but throws a feast. He doesn't make him wear threadbare hand-me-downs, but gives him the finest robe. There's music and dancing, and that's when the older brother, the one who's done things the right way, gets mad. It's not that his brother is back that bothers this older son. He hears the music and dancing and asks someone to tell him what's going on. He doesn't like the answer, and like with the younger brother, the father who loves his sons goes out to him to try to plead with him, to offer comfort. The one who is going to get the rest of the property is mad that he's been doing what he's supposed to do. As we look at the world around us and see how one 19-year-old's website added rocket fuel to get us to where we are, we may have the tendency to be the older brother. In Bible study, I encourage people to ask who they are in a story. This passage lets us think of ourselves as the tax collectors and sinners hearing the story, the Pharisees complaining about it. The father or one of the brothers? As the firstborn of three, I am always the older brother in this story. Every situation, every scenario. So I know what it's like to have righteous anger about doing what you're supposed to do, and that youngest one getting whatever he wants. So you get him to ask if you can go out to dinner after church, rather than ask yourself. Because you know, Dad will tell him yes. But in the world we live in, we get to ask who we are in every story. And as circumstances change from day to day, we can be different people. When we look at what's happening around us, it's very easy for a lot of reasons to feel like the older brother. Frederick Brennan has converted to Christianity because one of the core tenets of our faith is that God does not give up on us. He's not using grace as some kind of get-out-of-jail-free card. He's renounced Eight Coon and continues to use his skills to kill it with fire as best he can. He knows he's made mistakes doing what he thought he needed to do to survive with his physical and mental differences. And he knows he'll spend the rest of his life living with the consequences. He knows his name will always be associated with QAnon. He knows he was wrong. He's changed his life and is working to make amends in whatever ways he can. God has celebrated and rejoiced because this brother of ours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. The message of God's grace isn't just foolishness. It's offensive to those of us who consider ourselves righteous in any sphere. O holy Christ, your burdens are light, but your blessings are heavy, almost too weighty to bear. There's a hook in this meal. To receive is to follow, and you won't always say where. What fool would dare follow you? Amen.